Good afternoon. I'm Dave Pardo, Marketing Manager at Stratigent. Welcome to today's webinar presentation, Free Your Mind Mobile Analytics. Today's event will include Stratigent CEO Bill Bruno and Localytics Manager of Sales Engineering, Rick Scrow. Both will share the time that we have today, covering a couple of valuable topics. Once both presenters have concluded their presentations, we'll have time for questions and answers. Questions will be accepted via the questions box located within the webinar widget. We thank you for your participation. And with that, I turn now things over to Bill Bruno.
Great, thanks, Dave. Appreciate the introduction there, and thank you everyone who's joined today for the webinar. I hope you find this to be extremely valuable. I thought I'd sort of start things off by just giving you, for those of you that aren't familiar, just a high-level overview of who Stratigent is, what we do, and why we do it. We've been in the industry now for over 12 years, and our sole purpose in life is to partner with our clients to provide consulting services that can act as a wrapper around the different technologies they're currently using to collect and analyze data across all of their different channels, to build a data-driven analytics program and ultimately be an agent of change for their organization to use that data to tell a story and then take action on what that story is telling them. And you'll see here from this slide, there's several channels that we tend to operate in for our clients, and our services are both business and technical in focus to help you not only get things implemented, up and running and speaking to each other, but also allow you to leverage the business expertise to analyze that data, generate those insights, and be that agent of change. Also, for those of you that are wondering, we do also offer up bookings for Dave Pardo if you're looking to have him work at your local radio station, given how awesome his radio voice is. And so from an agenda standpoint today, I'm going to sort of walk through Stratigent's approach to a mobile tracking framework, predominantly for apps that we leverage for our clients, and sort of the way that we try to have our clients approach tracking and understanding the usage of mobile across their different channels. And then we will have Rich jumping in here after me to give an overview of Localytics, one of our premier vendor partners here in the mobile analytics space, and obviously provide a demo of the solution as well. And then, as Dave mentioned, we will be doing a question and answer session here at the end of the webinar. We're going to try to secure about 10 minutes for that. And you'll notice in the drop-down on the widget, there's a question section that you can submit to, and we will try to get through as many of those as we possibly can. So, overall, from just as you think about mobile analytics, at a high level, this is sort of the framework that Stratigent employs overall when we're getting started in conversations with clients to try to partner with them and help them better understand their data. And from an analytics perspective, down the left-hand side here, really just all the different channels that they may currently be collecting or owning data from. It can be a variety of offline media sources. It could be external in the form of email, display, search, social, mobile, so on and so forth. The website, it could be a CRM or an enterprise data warehouse. The list is endless, and our goal is to try to help work with clients to sort of mold their vision and their business objectives to be able to manipulate that data and get the right data to the right people at the right time. And for some people, that may be ongoing reports and dashboards, for folks like the executives. But for the power users or the people that are looking to get their hands dirty, it's about generating analysis, insights, and ultimately working towards, building a testing and optimization program, trying to personalize the experience or improve upon the existing flows that you may have within a particular channel or across multiple channels. Obviously, one of the main points of conversation here this year that we've had with clients is mobile. The number 2 conversation we've had recently would be social, which is why we did a webinar last month on that as well. That's available up on the website if you're interested in downloading that recording. But with regards to mobile, we're really trying to help clients think about this in a more simplistic manner, to sort of get away from some of the common issues that we've seen them encounter as they try to move forward with implementing tracking in mobile devices. And So with every conversation around implementation, we find it important at Stratigent to focus on having any implementation be business focused, in that starting first by trying to understand what the goals are. And I think these goals, at a high level are twofold. Obviously you're trying to tell a story and you're trying to answer questions that pertain to that story. How are users using our mobile devices? Are they using mobile and the website? How often are they using the mobile versus the website? And which actions are they taking in mobile? Are they trying those same actions in the web? So on and so forth. The list can be endless. But then there's also that secondary part of the goal, in terms of who signs your paychecks, in terms of what are the executives looking to achieve and answer from mobile. And from that, what's going to follow will be some KPIs or key performance indicators or success metrics, right? So you have these goals, you need a way to measure them to understand not only what's working and what isn't, but are the actions that you're taking to improve upon the process working? Are you able to get more people using the mobile device, as an example, if that's your goal? Or are the things that you're doing not necessarily working, in which case it's time to go back to the drawing board? But as you're initially moving forward with a mobile implementation, I think first and foremost, once you've established those goals and those metrics, you need to think about the approach, right? And this is where the wheels come off the bus for a lot of clients, and I'll get to this in the upcoming slides to explain further. But the approach to mobile needs to be drastically different than the approach that you've traditionally used for analytics within really any other channel, specifically the website, in terms of the ones that we've been implementing the longest in, for the last several years. And once you have that approach agreed to, and you're moving forward with the implementation, you need to engage on that. Just implementing it once and walking away does not work in the mobile world. It's kind of a double-edged sword, and the same can be said for social, in that, traditionally, when you're implementing analytics across your website, it's a relatively static entity, right? And there's significant IT development processes and release cycles, and things that cause major change on the website to be a bit of an undertaking and not happen overnight. And the nature of both mobile and social is so much different, in that the releases are happening all the time, right? With regards to social, you can go and change your entire social presence overnight without conforming to the same IT standards and release cycles you've historically had to. With mobile, yes, depending on Android or iOS, you have specific standards and things that need to be met, from the gods, such as whatever Apple deems appropriate, as an example. But it's still much easier, and it's a much more rapidly evolving sector that your changes are happening much more frequently. And so it really gives you the opportunity to, as you engage and evaluate these goals, to really innovate and optimize your mobile environment, because of it being a much more fluid environment and something that you can much more readily change as you start to see different interactions by your users. And to touch on sort of the approach a bit, there really, when you're implementing a mobile, there should be two things that you're trying to achieve. And yes, there may be, per my previous slide, several goals and several metrics that fall into this, but there's sort of two main points that we try to hammer home with our clients as we're moving forward with mobile implementation. The first and foremost, is you need to be able to come up with a way to create a common identifier for cross-channel analysis. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when someone's using your mobile device, you want to be able to set within your tracking framework an identifier that can then be leveraged in other channels, such as the website, or potentially even in the store, for those of you with the brick and mortar presence, to be able to tie that together, to be able to say, yes, Bill interacted with us on the mobile and he booked a flight, and he then went to the web to change his seats as the flight drew nearer. And those types of insights are extremely important, because you want to be able to understand what actions are being taken, when they're being taken, and within what channels those are being taken. And you'll see as Rich walks through the Localytics environment and demo, but there are some really unique and cool features that Localytics provides to help you down this path when they're in that mobile channel, to give you the option to do some real-time optimization and to present users with offers based upon what you know about them. And if you were just focusing on just the mobile data in order to do that, you might miss part of the story. And so that's why you need that common identifier to know what things that I've done in the other channels that may contribute to the offer you'd want to present me with in real time and within the mobile device. And to get to that, there's one common roadblock that we've noticed across all of our clients when they're moving into trying to track mobile devices, both tablets and phones. And the common issue here is what we sort of refer to as the historical page view mentality. All of you have probably at some point implemented, I hope, have implemented a web analytics tool on your website. And as a result, you know that the analytics tools are focused on page views. That's how they measure their licensing fees, all but Google, I should say, who just charges you a flat fee. But regardless, they're focused on page views. It's built in JavaScript, and you're deploying that JavaScript across the site to view behavior, right? To see what pages people are viewing, what paths they're taking. And over the years, that has evolved on the web. They're from Flash, Flex, Ajax, action tracking, so on and so forth, and and responsive design. All of those things on the web alone are moving away from that page view mentality and more towards an action-based tracking system. But that's even more the case in mobile. Page views from a mobile standpoint don't really exist. And if you're trying to track sort of with that page view mentality, it has a tendency to make things much more complex. It's more about the actions in mobile, and that requires us to really fundamentally change the way that we think about mobile analytics and the way that we think about the collection and analysis of data for those mobile devices. And what we've seen with clients is that if you're trying to implement with a page view mentality, it causes a lot of overcomplication on the implementation. It causes the implementation to be unscalable, and in many cases, because of that ever-changing and quicker release cycle for mobile devices, it causes you to have to redo everything almost every time. And the reason for that is, mobile devices, they're not designed in JavaScript. They don't function well with JavaScript. Trying to track pages, or in mobile what we would call just views, within the app for the purposes of pathing and things of that nature becomes so incredibly complex that yet it's really missing the mark. As you think about a mobile app, such as United, a client of Stratigent's, you could ask yourself, as I open up the app and I arrive on this screen, is it really important to know that I saw this screen, or is it more important to know what actions I've selected or hit or clicked on to complete within that app? And I would argue that it's really the latter. And if you're focused on the action tracking versus trying to understand the pathing, you get around a lot of the complex implementation hurdles that we've run into with clients when they're trying to get granular information out of these apps. And we can go even so far as to have identifiers within the actions. So, for example, if I click on the flight status, we can identify what screen the person clicked that from, for the purposes of analysis, without really having to get very in depth with the embedding the tracking. And furthermore, as you focus on just tracking these individual actions, these actions are going to exist in most likely every iteration of your mobile app. New actions may pop up, but the point is that it becomes much more scalable to implement and to continue to progress your implementation of a mobile app when you're focused on tracking the actions and not trying to track every single view and movement that I may make within the app. And to really sort of take this a step further, it's really about creating a new way of thinking. And as I mentioned before, it's not about the path, but rather where the person performed that action. right? And you may have 3, 4, 5, 6 different places where I could complete that action, such as checking my flight status or changing the seats on my flight. And you don't need to know, what 3 screens I took to get there. All you really need to know is that I did it, and this is the screen that I did it from, because you're really trying to understand my preference, right? Not really trying to understand how I use it. It's kind of it's a binary operation. Did Bill change his seats on the mobile apps? Yes or no? What percentage of the time does Bill change his seat on the mobile app versus logging into the website to do so? And with the right common identifiers in place, you'd be able to analyze that for all of your users or for different segments of your users. For someone like United, they could look at, Premier members versus, silver, gold, 1K members, so on and so forth, and see what the preferences are there across these different multiple channels so that you can better message and optimize their journeys, right? So when I identify myself, you now know my historical preferences or the probability of what I'm looking to do, and you can create a specific situation for me and prompt me with potentially offers that are relevant to me based upon what you know. And it's also not about how long I spend in the app. Sure, you could argue that, yeah, if I'm in the app for a while, maybe I'm confused, but that kind of goes away. And it's more about how many times I interact with it, how frequently I do, and how many active users you have. I've been in several meetings with clients where they will come in and they'll proclaim we had 1,000 downloads last month, with no mention of the concept of active users. And again, as you think about key performance indicators or success metrics, it doesn't really matter that 1,000 people downloaded it if none of them interacted with it, right? And so we really try to sort of change the game here from a focus standpoint and have our clients more look at, okay, how many active users do you have? How often in a given time frame do they interact with that app? How frequently do they? What's the latency between those, and what are the common actions that they're taking? And with again, that unique identifier and the ability to integrate that with other channels, you're going to have the ability to tell a more complete story. It's going to be more scalable. It's going to allow you to get past some of those roadblocks that I've previously mentioned clients facing, and it does require a shift in mentality, much like it took some time over the years for organizations to even begin to trust web data and using that web data to make decisions. We're running into the same things here with mobile, but you have to start somewhere, and I'd urge you to start here with this new way of thinking as it pertains to mobile devices. I also know that I've said a lot here in a short period of time, and being cognizant of that, before I turn things over to Rich, I do want to again reiterate that I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and you can again find the question panel within the widgets there, within the widget for the webinar to submit those, and we'd be more than happy to answer those during the course of this webinar at the end, or as potential follow-ups as well. And with that, I will turn things over to Rich here to walk through Localytics and give you a demo of their fantastic solution. And while he's adding back in, I thought I could share a quick case study of something recently that we've done for a client with their mobile apps, leveraging Localytics. So one of our clients is big in the is a hotel conglomerate. They have conference apps and things of that nature. And one of the things that we've been successful at doing for them was helping identify which conference attendees were also high-level status members within their hotel chain and had stayed in their hotels previously, and that gave a unique opportunity for us using those common identifiers to, while they were within the mobile conference app, they were able to present them with an offer specific to members for a free appetizers and past appetizers and drinks setting for just those users, which I thought was a great way to leverage not only the the Localytics capabilities, but also leveraging the data that they had collected from both the web and the mobile devices to present those offers. It was a relatively simple implementation, and I think is it's one of the sort of crawl, walk, run type approaches to mobile, and that was more in the walking realm, I suppose, but is a great real-time example of how you can use these offers and use the Localytics platform, to combine this data and make those offers. And with that, I will. It looks like Rich is ready, so I'll turn things back over to him.
Yeah, sorry about that, folks. Just as soon as I accepted control of the GoTo meeting, we crashed. So really, I'm going to walk through a couple slides here today, and then I'm going to dive into the meat of the matter, which is the demo of the Localytics dashboard. And thanks for that. Thanks for that really great setup. Just want to talk at a high level about the company, Localytics. Really, we came about because we saw a number of massive industry challenges. Our co-founders were in the app space, and they looked at things and they realized that there's a lot going on here. And you can try to build an app, or you can look at this as an opportunity to help everyone make their apps better. And that happened very, very quickly. If you look back, maybe 7, 8 years ago, there weren't really many apps out there. The smartphones hadn't really taken off, anything like that. And now we're in a world where there's there's almost 1 million plus apps. They've had over 1 billion plus downloads, and that's just in the iTunes store. Monetizing apps really, really tricky. So this is some insight from I think it's Forrester about Android. It's really, really hard to get people to be involved with your app beyond just interacting with it. So getting folks to pay for an app, really challenging. So there's new monetization models that are really coming up, and it's really, really challenging for folks without some insight into users' behaviors in those apps to come up with effective strategies to monetize. And as you can see here, 4 out of the 5 paid apps in the Android store, they've been downloaded less than 100 times. And I certainly don't think that anyone's making an incredible amount of money off these, and nor do I think that the app creators are happy with that level of success. So one of the things that we know, and this is just in terms of our own research and working with our customers, is about 22% of apps are used only once. So when Bill was speaking a little bit earlier, he mentioned that he was working with a customer and they were super excited that they had 1,000 downloads or 10,000 downloads. I've talked to some customers, they'll come and they'll say, oh, we've had 800,000 downloads. And that's awesome. But if 22% of those are only being used once, there's another big chunk of folks who are never even opening your app. You end up wondering, okay, well, that's great, but what's next? And that's where we get into that understanding user behavior a little bit better. At Localytics, our mission and what we set out to do, what gets us excited and what gets us up every morning is really to empower brands to craft valuable relationships with their users through both understanding and through interaction. And you'll see that both as we dive into the demo. In who we are, we work with the biggest of the big. We work with 5,000 companies, over 20,000 apps in that portfolio, about 1 billion devices, and we process around 50 billion data points. So a whole lot of activity. And as you can see, we're trusted by the industry leader in just about every major category. eBay, CVS, Fox, ESPN, SoundCloud, Microsoft, and so on. These customers are the biggest of the big, and they require a great deal of insight about their users, and they've come to Localytics to get that level of insight and understand that behavior, and then also take action on that. So I'm going to change into the demo here. And as you folks can see, we're in the Localytics dashboard. So the dashboard is your window into the behavior of your users and their usage of your application. And what we're looking at right here is, this is our customizable dashboard. So for somebody, for maybe the CEO of United, when he's looking for some information, maybe there's only a couple things that are important to him. Or as folks who've worked in analytics, analysts know they have many masters, and they end up being a bottleneck towards a lot of those. They end up serving and generating a different report for marketers, and then a different report for the analytics team, and then the product team needs something different. Customizable dashboards allow you to take all of the different reports in Localytics that are important to you and pull those all into one place. And you can create those and share those out with different user groups as you need. Now, if you look down the left-hand navigation of the dashboard, you can see roughly those different chunks of information, those different groups of reports that we generate with Localytics. The first being analyze, and this is where you go for your analytic reports. So high-level information about usage and engagement, and also granular information about different behaviors that are taking place inside the app. So Bill, he mentioned some action tracking, and that's where you'd go to see that granular information about not only did the user tap on that button, but what screen were they at when they did it? Maybe what level of customer they were. Were they the Premier member, or were they maybe somebody who just signed up for the frequent flyer member? Acquire is where you'd go to better understand your different user acquisition campaigns. We talked a lot about different channels and understanding your user across multiple different channels. One of the ways it's really important to understand your users is how are they coming to your app? Are they coming to your app through organic means, or are they just going to the App Store and going United and downloading that app? Or are they seeing some activity that you've got, maybe you're running a sponsored campaign on Facebook to drive folks to download, or with any number of paid acquisition partners? That's where you'd go to see that information. Segment is where you'd go to build out different segments of your users. So understanding and seeing, creating a group of users who are your high-value users versus your low-value users. Interact is where you'd go to interact with those users. So not just understanding their behavior, but also sending them a promotional offer, for example, when they've hit a certain threshold. Or in this case, we're going to be walking through a sample app that is an e-commerce app today, perhaps encouraging folks, driving more folks to check out of the application. And then finally, we have monetize, and that's where you'd go to track your customer lifetime value. So as an e-commerce app, that's something that we're probably tracking in terms of revenue generated. But for something like a Hulu of the world or a Netflix, that's something where maybe you're tracking amount of time they've been streaming content. For a weight loss app or a fitness app, that may be number of miles ran or number of calories burnt. But that's where you're going to go to track that one key metric. So we're going to dive in a little bit and look at some of these different reports today. In the first set of reports we're going to look at are what I like to call the out-of-the-box reports. So Localytics itself is, there's one component that you install inside of your application, and there's another component that's running on the Localytics side of things. And so that allows us to capture all this great information and process it and serve it up to you in these meaningful ways in these various different charts. So one of the things that was mentioned before was just around shifting that paradigm away from page views. And yes, it's interesting to know that people are looking at information, but really, how many people are active in a given day? And that's a term that we hear discussed a lot. It's called MAU, or monthly active users, or daily active users. And this first report that we're looking at here in usage is answering those questions for us. So first, on any given day, I can see how many active users I've had. And then for this time range, so we're looking at about a month here from April 1st to May 3rd, I can see how many monthly active users I've had. But we can actually go to a level deeper and start to understand this split by a number of different dimensions. And these dimensions are things that are provided all out of the box just by integrating that Localytics, that piece of Localytics into your application. So this is something where we can look at users in terms of new versus returning, or the country, language, everything that you see under technology, the things you see under customer acquisition, and then also retention. So in this case, one of the reports that's always valuable to look at, and to understanding, at a deeper level, how your different acquisition activities are going, is the new versus returning. So how many users have you brought in that are new on a given day versus returning? And then you can actually take a look and see this and see what that trend looks like. And for our e-commerce app, we had a really big launch at the beginning of April, and we haven't really done too much exciting with the app since then. So you can see our new user growth rate is trailing off, and now we're settling in at about 1,000 new users a day, which is a very good rate, but it's something where we want to have that insight, so that maybe we can take some action and run maybe some different acquisition campaigns around it. The complement to understanding the usage of the application is understanding users' engagement. And as Bill was talking about before, there's really two elements. The first is when a user is inside of your application, how much time are they spending inside of your app? So that's what we would consider the session. And you can think about a session as just you sit down and you've got one usage of the application. Maybe if you get interrupted really quickly and you answer a text message, that's still considered one usage. But if you answer a phone call and it's your mom wanting to know if you're coming home from Christmas and she wants to let you know about Aunt Betty, that's a 15-minute conversation. You come back into the United app, you're probably not in the same mental context that you were before. So that would be two separate sessions. But the engagement report, the first one that we're looking at here is around session length. So understanding how much time people are spending in your app while they're there. And depending on the app, these numbers could be very different. For something like Angry Birds, where you're playing a level or two, and then you're off, you're continuing your commute or you're off your lunch break, that's going to be something where there's short session length. So something where it's maybe 1 to 3 minutes. For something like this, it's an e-commerce app. You have to do some research. Maybe you're comparing different, maybe different presents for the holiday season. That's something where you want to take a little bit more time and make sure that you get the right Christmas present or the right holiday present. And that's something where it's going to be on the longer side of things. This is an important report to understand for a few reasons. To use the United example, if there's expectation from the product management folks and the marketing folks, then I'll be able to get into the United app and book my flight to wherever I want to go within reasonable confines in less than 10 minutes. And those folks look at this information and see, wow, the median session length is 1.5 minutes and the average is 5 minutes, 37 seconds. Maybe we want to rethink our expectations around how much time people are spending in our app. And maybe we want to optimize that process as much as possible to make it as short as possible to fit within this usage pattern. Or maybe we want to target users to encourage them to stay into the app with maybe value-added functionality, or maybe it's a value-added message, free upgrade or free promotional activity. The opposite of this, or not the opposite, but the complement to this is that session latency is what I believe what Bill called it. Session latency is just the amount of time in between the sessions. So for something like Angry Birds or Facebook or Tumblr, those are things that you're going to be using frequently for a limited period of time. You're snacking on them. You're taking a little bite here and there, and you're having lots of bites throughout the day. So you're having a session interval where it's every hour or every day. For something like a Netflix or a Hulu, something where you're streaming media, and for myself, when I'm watching something on Hulu, when I see that little timer that lets me know there's 7 seconds until the next episode comes on, that's when I really make a decision of how much of my weekend am I going to kill watching reruns of Golden Girls. So it's something where you have that moment of time, but then you end up spending and you binge and you watch, the entire 3rd season. You don't do that every day. You do that maybe once a weekend. So your session interval there would be something that's every 4 days, every 3 days, something like that. So it's split out on a much further time, but your individual usage of the app will be longer. And some apps are just used a lot every day. And that's something like Tumblr. Tumblr folks are on Tumblr all the time looking at that information. Photography apps are a lot like that as well. Lots of folks just using the app a lot. Some games are like this, where it's just lots of people addicted. I think Candy Crush is the one that most people are familiar with at this point in time. But Candy Crush is a game where you play it a little bit, but then you get into a level, you can't quite beat it, you keep after it, and then you look up and it's been 45 minutes. And then you're back doing that on your commute home, so you're playing it a couple times a day. In all of these reports that we've looked at so far, we have the ability to split. Just like we did in usage, we have the ability to split out engagement by any of these out-of-the-box dimensions. Alternatively, if I wanted to zoom in and just understand a specific set of my users and I wanted to ignore the rest, you could also apply a set of filters here. So for example, let's say I wanted to understand what the session interval looked like for folks who are on a particular version of the app. I had some concerns that there were some bugs on it. And I know our marketing team's been doing a lot of activity in Brazil for folks on the iPad. I could actually zoom this information down to just folks who are on that particular version of the app in Brazil on iPads. And if I wanted to, I could go 2 more levels deep and zoom into really a very, very small, narrow group of my users. So with usage and events, there's one other piece that really paints a complete picture of the high-level behaviors. And what we're talking about right now are the things that are important to all applications. And that is the retention cohort. And this is something, again, that's provided just by integrating that little bit of Localytics code into your application. This is something that gives you some high-level retention information. So for a given day, week, or month, You can understand the number of users who first used the app on that day, week, or month, and then the percentage of users that came back each day, week, or month later. So in this case, we're looking at weekly. So we can see that of the 3,746 users who started using the app on October 7th, 61% came back a week later, 37% came back 2 weeks later, 22%, and so on. So it gives you a high-level sense of the retention. We're going to change gears here a little bit and move into events. If we think about usage, engagement, and cohorts, those are things that are important to all apps. Events are the custom and specific behaviors in your application. So for example, when I tapped that booking button on the United example, what screen was I on? Was I signed into the application? Had I already looked at other flights? And those are what we call events. And there's some associated information with those that we like to call attributes. This is an e-commerce example. So something like product viewed would be the event. And then there'd be some information associated with that. Maybe what the product was, maybe what source it came from, maybe what category it was part of. And what that allows you to do is really to develop a more holistic sense of how people are looking at products inside of your application. So we'll drill in here to product view. And I have the ability to view this information a number of different ways. Just like everything in Localytics, you can go very broad and see high-level information, or we can drill in very granularly. So I can see this information in terms of occurrences, so the number of times it's happened on any given day, the number of users who've done it, or the number of sessions that it's happened. And I can look at this in terms of any of those other dimensions that we talked about. And then there's a set of key value pairs or sort of associated information with this activity. So as we said, for product viewed, there's some things like category. What category was that product? Did I share that on a social network? And what was the source of that information? So did I look at it? Did it come from my favorites list, or was it something that I searched for? But we can actually start to take this and start to go deeper. And we can look at this information in terms of occurrences of category, split out by day. So just repurposing that chart below. But then we can add a split. Now, because my app is integrated with Facebook and I'm tracking gender, I've captured that information as a custom dimension. For the United example, this could be something like what level of frequent flyer status a user has. And you could split out that information very simply. So now I'm looking at the category, so the number of times a category has shown up, the number of times a user has looked at a particular category or product in a particular category, split out by gender. And if I zoom this up to 100%, I can actually see a trend starts to emerge. It looks like there's certain categories where men and women are split about equally, and there's certain categories where women are highly engaged and other categories where men are highly engaged. So that's an opportunity for me to start to potentially market to these different folks. For example, it looks like pets are split about 50-50. So I know that if I'm running some sort of interaction campaign or some sort of marketing campaign, either as part of my application or because I'm tracking that unique user ID that Bill mentioned before, that's something where I could run that on the website and encourage all folks of both genders to be involved in maybe a promotion that I'm running for pets. Alternatively, with automotive products, maybe it would make more sense to skew that a little bit more to the masculine side because it looks like lots of men are looking at products in the automotive category. And the same would be true except with women for the jewelry category, the clothing category. So it's certainly starting to give me some more insight into the way people are behaving inside my application beyond just knowing that they looked at a product page. Now, events are really what I like to consider the engine room of activity with Localytics. A lot of what you're going to be doing and looking at is going to be driven by those events. So something like a funnel for the checkout process, this is something that allows you to see at a glance how many people are making it through this flow. So how many people looked at a product, added to their shopping cart, and the like. And then at any given step, you can drill in and see what that conversion rate looks like day over day. Any drop-off that happens, so for users who made it to this step or for users who didn't make it through to the next step, what they went off and did in between. And then finally, some detailed information. And you can look at this split out. In this case, we can look at this in terms of the source of the product that they viewed. So being able to split out a funnel by any of those different attributes or key values that you're capturing associated with the events that are in the funnel. We're going to change gears here a little bit just to talk about the way acquisition activity plays in with Localytics. Acquisition is something where you're driving users to your app and you're looking to not only understand, did they download, to Bill's point, but what are they doing when they're there? And we saw we could split out all of our reports by this information, but we also provide a consolidated dashboard for that. And in this dashboard, you can see for any given campaign or acquisition source, how many users came in from that campaign, how many sessions per user, what the lifetime value is per user, and then what the total revenue or the total lifetime value is for that group of users. So this, in terms of a revenue basis, this allows you to make actually a really quick ROI decision. If you know you're paying a certain dollar amount per impression on Facebook and you're generating a certain amount of revenue from that campaign, you can make a very easy decision on whether or not to invest more in that space. With all this analytics information, a lot of times we're asked, okay, great, I know there's a lot going on. I know all this information about my users. What am I going to do? How do I take advantage of that? And that's where Interact comes in. And Interact allows you to interact with your users. You can send them in-app messages, which are contextually relevant messages that happen while they're using the application, or push notification messages. And these are things that, while a user is away from the application, you encourage them to come back. We'll dive into setting up an in-app messaging campaign, but the process for setting up in-app and push messages are approximately the same. So first, you have the ability to decide who. So this is defining your addressable audience. And you have the ability, much like with everything in Localytics, to go very broad and target everyone, or go incredibly granular and target folks in a particular segment or in a particular filtered group. So you have the ability to target perhaps just those users who've never checked out. And that's what we're doing in this. Once you've got that message, or once you've got that group defined, you define what message they'll see. In this case, we're looking at targeting those users who've abandoned their shopping cart. So we'll build out a message that gives them a lightweight discount, something like 50% off. And we can see this on the device. But we could make this much more interactive or creative than just a simple message with a call to action. We could do something as rich and complex as a multi-page survey with some branching logic, or an introductory video to encourage folks to take advantage of some new functionality. Finally, because this is in-app messaging, you have the ability to pick when, so which of those key actions that you're tracking do you want this message to appear on? Next time they load the app, or perhaps it's next time they add an item to their shopping cart. And once you've got this campaign set up and you're all up and running with that, you have the ability to view the campaign performance. So you can see the number of impressions, so the number of people who saw it, the number of people who clicked on it or interacted with it, and then finally the number of folks who took that desired conversion event, in this case, drove folks to checkout. And then finally, the last piece is the customer lifetime value tracking. And this is something where every app has some notion of this, and we talked about a couple different examples before. For an e-commerce app, this is probably revenue, and it's probably based on in-app purchases. For other apps, it's based on maybe activity, so the number of minutes of content streamed or the number of articles read. And you have the ability to split this out by any of those different key dimensions that we talked about. So you can look at this in terms of customer lifetime value by new versus returning, or you can look at customer lifetime value by day, split out by those different acquisition sources. So you can see this information and see how much Facebook is bringing into your total revenue pool on any given day, while also seeing what the total revenue that's come in, the number of customers you've had, and the revenue per customer. And if this was something where you were looking at non-revenue-based metrics, these titles would respond to that. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up and hand it back over to Bill, and I think we'll be taking some questions.
Yes, actually, thank you. This is Dave. Just wanted to thank Rich and Bill for both of your presentations. At this time, we encourage attendees to use the questions window of the webinar widget to ask any questions you might have for panelists to answer. So I'll just give you about a minute or so to do that. But it looks like Stephanie had added a question during Rich's presentation. So it's a two-part question. She asks, or she says, she didn't quite follow in-app messaging. Can you explain the difference between that and push messaging? And also, when did you use push messaging versus in-app messaging?
Yeah, that's a great question, and Stephanie, that's a question that a lot of folks get. In-app messaging is, you can think about it as just-in-time marketing. So you know a user's inside of your application, and you know that they're walking down a particular flow. They're adding an item to their shopping cart, but they've never checked out before. That's the right time inside of your application to encourage them to check out with a pop-up notification. So that's when you'd use an in-app message. So think of it as a just-in-time, point-in-time, specific message to encourage a particular behavior. Push notification is something that happens outside of the application. So I'm surfing on Facebook. I get a push notification from the e-commerce app that an item on my shopping list has now gone on sale. That's going to pull me back into the application. So you can think about push as more of a retention tool or a tool to keep your app being sticky and keep pulling people back into that space. And then when they're there, you want them to take advantage of a particular set of functionality, and that would be something you do with in-app messaging.
Okay. Here's another question from David. This appears to be possibly for Bill. How do you typically see an implementation for mobile apps rollout? Is it a phased approach?
Sure. No, that's a great question. I mean, I know I briefly touched on sort of the concept of crawl, walk, run as I was going through some of the different examples during my portion, and I think it's important when you're going through sort of the goal definement and success metrics and identifying the actions or the things that need to be tracked in order to tell that story. I think it's safe to say that you may not be able to roll out all of that tracking on the initial, in time for the initial release, or as you're moving forward with developing the mobile app. And so it's important, once you've got that in place, to come up with the right approach. And it typically is a phased approach. It's typically involves a prioritization of what needs to be done versus what right away versus what needs to be done down the road. And it's important, as you think about this, to have an end goal, an end game, and a vision for what how you want to be able to interact with your customers in the mobile channel, and what you want to be able to do with that data. And that ultimately becomes your guiding light as you go through different iterations of the application over time.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question from Rick. Thanks for the overview of the reporting. Can you talk to the implementation of tools in terms of the application and data collection? What is required to support the rich reporting that you showed us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So the integration with Localytics, it's really easy. The out-of-the-box reports that we talked about, that's about 6 lines of code to integrate. So everything that we saw in usage, engagement, and cohorts, those are all things that are generated for you automatically just based on the information that's captured. Certainly this question can go lots of different ways. My contact information is on the screen, so if this doesn't answer the question, do feel free to reach out for some more context. In terms of the custom elements that we saw, those things that we saw in events and funnels and all of that, that whole process is actually very easy from a coding standpoint. Each one is about a line of code. The trickier part, and this goes back to the earlier question, is figuring out exactly what you want to measure. Oftentimes, it's so easy to capture information with Localytics, you end up capturing everything, and you don't have a clear sense of why you captured it or how to take action on it. So that's something where we like to work through great partners like Bill and Stratigent to really make sure that you're understanding those key things that you want to measure, and then you're sort of crawl, walk, run through your analytics integration to capture that.
Great. And by the way, everyone, thanks so much for all the questions you've been submitting. We're going to try to get to all of them. Here's another question from Deb. Since push notification is controlled by the user, do you have any info about how often people decline push notifications?
Yeah, that's another great question, and that's something that we get actually a lot. We have a sense that about 30% of users opt in to push. The balance choose not to. what we're starting to see the emergence of is customers being able to set push preferences. It turns out that customers are actually really interested to get push notifications, but they just want things that are relevant to their needs. And the broadcast, the big marketing messages aren't necessarily all that helpful to them. But targeting messages and having specific options, for example, ESPN. I'm in Boston, I'm a Red Sox fan. I don't really want to get push notification about what's going on with the Seattle Sounders soccer team. Not of interest to me. But allowing me to opt in and say, hey, I'm interested in pushes about these sets of topics, I'm willing to opt in to get that relevant topical information. And that's something where using our targeting, you can also start to make sure that you're really only sending relevant messages to relevant people. But that's something where at the large level, it's about 30% of folks actually opt in to push.
Great, thank you. Here's another question from Vicky. I'm not sure for who this might be for, but if you use a silo to collect mobile app data, how do you go about tying that together with other channels?
Sure. So I'll take a stab at this, and then Rich, I think you could speak specifically to some of the capabilities you guys have that we've built together in the past to get some data across. But yeah, I think from our standpoint, as you're implementing, I think implementing mobile in a silo is becoming obviously more and more the way to do it for a lot of the reasons that I mentioned, because a vendor like Localytics has built specifically for your mobile apps. And the other side to that is then, yes, that's creating a silo of data that's separate from your other channels. But I think we're seeing this as niche vendors come up across all channels. We're seeing more and more of this. And what it's really about is understanding and taking advantage of the different APIs available to you across these vendors to bring the data together to get the right data to the right people at the right time. And it really comes back to, again, understanding the goals and the metrics and what story you're trying to tell and who needs to be able to visualize that story and in what way, because you're going to often find that you're going to have most likely different levels of integration based upon the user and what that user is trying to do with that data.
And I think just to add on to that a little bit more, in terms of breaking down different silos, working with partners like Stratigent allows us to get that information into a variety of different back-end systems that you have. We know some of the customers that we had on our customer slide. Certainly, Localytics isn't the only lens that they have into their customer. While it'd be great if we were the only analytics provider for Microsoft, I think that's far from the truth. So with a customer like that, and with all the customers that we have at different service levels, we have the ability to either work with a partner like Stratigent to get that integrated into your own backend system, or for you yourself to do it manually. We do provide everything at the raw data level that's essentially your data that you can do with what you wish. So you got a couple of different options there. I recommend the partnership route because it actually makes everyone's life, it makes it very easy for everyone to get what they need in a very quick way. But certainly sometimes folks are a little bit more ambitious and they like to actually run and work with that raw data themselves. That's also an option.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing I'll add on to that is that we've had several joint customers here across Stratigent and Localytics where we've built some productized integrations between the Localytics data sets and some of the major analytics vendors out there. So if any of you are interested in that and would like to explore that further, obviously feel free to reach out to either of us and we can start that conversation for you.
Thanks, guys. I think we have just time for maybe one or maybe two more questions left. Here's another one from Richard. If I want to do A/B testing during in-app messages or using in-app messages, do I have to segment my A and B groups in advance? Do I have to re-release the app, or can I create tests on the fly?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's a lot of different variations of A/B testing. So in terms of any in-app message, the actual campaign creative that you're running, and the same is true for a push notification campaign, you can build out that segment, and then say I want to make this an A/B test. Some percentage of your users, if you run two, if you've got an A and a B, 50% of your users will see the A message, 50% of the users will see the B message. Going forward, and I think as we look into the future of where this industry is headed and some of the things that Localytics is very bullish about, is around beyond just being able to run sort of a test of which campaign is responding better, but being able to better take advantage of all of the functionality of the app. So doing maybe it's some codeless updates or things where you're enabling different sets of functionality for different sets of users and seeing how that behaves. I think personalization is a huge point. I think it's something that we're working towards, and I think it's something that we're excited about, and I think it's going to be 2014 will be a big year for that. But in terms of the specific question, releasing an in-app message, having varieties of in-app messages, running those campaigns, just like with push, there's no need to re-release your application. Once you've got our code in your app, you have the ability to run in-app and push notification campaigns with no further releases to the App Store.
Great. I think we have time for just one last question. This is from Victor. Am I able to obtain raw data and integrate it with my other analytics programs?
Yes, absolutely, and that's something where there's a number of different ways. As Bill mentioned, there's a productized integration that you can work with through Stratigent. Alternatively, you can have access to everything down to the individual session level in serialized JSON format in Amazon and an Amazon S3 bucket specific for you as a customer. And then you can export that. You can run any big data processes you'd like on that, but it is your data to do with which you wish.
Yeah, and the only thing that I'll sort of tail on to that is that we've seen several clients using that information and sending that into their own BI data sets for the and sending it into things like SAS as well as more recent technologies like Google's BigQuery to be able to really do with it to your heart's content. It's a very flexible data set, and we've seen a lot of clients get some value out of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. On behalf of all attendees, we appreciate Stratigent's unique insights within the mobile channel, as well as Localytics overview and demo. What we covered today is certainly an important piece of the path all of us in the industry are on. Truly innovative information that both of you have shared with us today, so thank you. With that said, that concludes today's webinar, Free Your Mind, Mobile Analytics. On behalf of Stratigent CEO Bill Bruno and Localytics Manager of Sales Engineering, Rich Scrow, we'd like to thank you for participating in today's event. For further questions, comments, or requests for additional information, feel free to contact the respected presenter directly, as shown on your screen, or email marketing@stratigent.com. Once again, we all thank you for attending today's webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.